It's high time that we awake from our sleep.
The scripture says, prepare to meet thy God. Are you prepared?
If you don't stand for something, then you will fall for anything.
All right, guys, welcome in today to Taking a Stand. We're excited to have with us a special guest, Dr. Fred Simon. But before I introduce him, I wanted to share from Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 17. It says, "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore, hear a word from my mouth and give them warning from me." And this is something that we have been trying to do with this podcast is be a watchman on the wall that's sounding the alarm when there's areas of danger, areas of deception, and things that we think you guys need to know about. And today we have a true watchman on the podcast show with us. We have Dr. Fred Simon, who's a dedicated family man, an accomplished professional, a compassionate individual with over 30 years of experience as a trauma surgeon. Dr. Simon has devoted his career to serving others and making a difference in the lives of his patients. And his commitment to excellence is evident in his extensive credentials as he's licensed to practice medicine in numerous states and has worked in a diverse range of hospitals. Dr. Fred, welcome into the show today. We're so blessed to have you.
Thank you, Pastor.
And thank you.
It's a blessing to be here.
Thank you for being a warrior too. Just a true watchman on the wall in the sense of the verse that we read here today. You've been, I think, doing this for a long time, speaking the truth and getting it out there for people to be able to have the knowledge to make the decisions that can impact their lives. I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about today. And also, just quickly want to note, you ran for Congress here in the state of Nevada. And that was, I believe, against Mark Amadei, who was the one who ended up winning that race, right?
That is correct.
But you gave it a go, and my hat's off to you for that. I love to see that fighting spirit that you have. So I think more of us need to do things like that.
Well, the important thing for me to do things like that is to get out in the public, and you end up learning.
Yeah.
Okay? And you get a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Life is, for me, mental, and it's emotional, and then it's the physical aspect, and you have to put all those together, which all connect to spirituality, whether you have it or not. And a lot of people are absent in that realm right now, unfortunately. I try to give a little bit of that while I'm doing the things I do. I was fortunate when I finished my training, which was in pancreatic biliary surgery, trauma, intensive care.
Okay.
I went and volunteered on the Navajo Indian Reservation, and then subsequently had a lot of impact in the Black community, and then my practice was significantly in the Hispanic community. And trauma is the window to all of America. So I practiced in pediatric hospital, major trauma centers to very small hospitals all over the United States. In fact, 39 communities, 69 hospitals, 14 states.
That's amazing. That's
pretty cool.
Really
it was
amazing.
pretty cool.
That's really neat. Well, thank you for that, and your service. I appreciate it so much, and I'm sure hundreds and hundreds of people have benefited from it. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about vaccinations. We're going to talk about the history of vaccinations. We're going to talk about Big Pharma, pharmaceutical companies that are kind of behind the scenes controlling a lot of things that maybe people don't know about. Is that correct?
No question about it. So when we look at anything in society, we've got the politics, which is basically, people misinterpret what a politician is or what politics is. Basically, someone that you elect as your politician is somebody who represents your ideas and thoughts. Or an ideology.
That's a great explanation.
That's all it is.
Yep.
Okay, so you can sit there and defame people who get elected in a political position, but those have been elected by people who believe in the same things that they represent that they're going to do.
Yeah, I like that you're pointing that out because that puts the onus on us as those that are having a voice in the election process. If we don't like who's in there, we need to change it. We need to take responsibility for that. I think what happens so often is it's very easy to just, basically speak down about a politician or label them as, all the same, sort of slimy or liars or whatever you want to call them. But really, you're basically saying that about yourself, because we're the ones as a society that have put them in that position in the first place. And in a certain way, that's a way of seeing it, I guess.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And the other aspect to it is you can look at the last election when you only have 29% of the populace participating.
Yeah.
Don't sit back when things start going wrong and, start using your critical voice. You didn't use a very simple pencil and send in a ballot.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's one of the things that I've learned through my political career, actually having run on to 3 big offices. It makes me and allows me to grow as a human being, to understand the human beings that I interact with.
That's a good perspective.
And it is. It's, you got to keep gaining perspective. And then you sit there and as we had talked before we started this, it should and it must in the end come back to, where do you stand spiritually?
Yeah.
As we grow older, we find out that life is a different animal than we thought it was when we were younger.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we're talking about today. There is a message. It's a psychological conditioning. Whereas when we get to vaccines, it's a biological manipulation.
Okay.
To cultural grooming. And then we get to education, where it's educational prepping of people to have an ideology to not think on their own.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Think about that.
Wow.
And that's what America is today.
Yeah.
And that's what America is doing to our youth. And that's what happened in the essence of the vaccine issues. Whereas in 1986, we got this National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act.
Yes.
Okay, we'll grow into that.
Yeah. Let's pause for a second. Let's go back to let's talk about the history of vaccinations. So can you give us a little bit of a brief history of how we got to kind of where we are today with this vaccination process and everything today in the United States?
Well, sure. And when we look at America, if you don't believe this, then your eyes aren't opening. America has a lot to do with economics and money. There have always been multimillionaires to billionaires who have pushed agendas. And so when we get to vaccination and medicine, we get directly to the J.D. Rockefeller family.
Okay.
And so they were big into petroleum. They had a lot of money. They didn't know where else to go, so they started the pharmaceutical industry. Okay. Not only did they start the pharmaceutical industry, they put a tremendous influence on medicine. Now, I'm an allopathic doctor, which is diagnosis, medications, surgery, and then we have homeopathic medicine, which is just as important.
Yeah.
So when we get back to the Rockefellers, they didn't want anything to do with homeopathic medicine, and it was suppressed significantly, including chiropractic care, acupuncture, plant-based, diet. All of this was then pushed to the side to create a business, drugs.
Okay.
And that drug business has been perpetuated in this society for years, decades. So then we have the vaccination $60 billion industry.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. And it's huge. It's everywhere you look. I mean, I feel like there's pressure all the time. I'll be watching a baseball game and the commercials come on, go get your booster, go get your vaccine for this, go get your vaccine for that. It seems like there's a lot of it. It's getting pushed like a business would be being pushed.
Sure. And we've got a lot of data out there too. When we look at things, and we can go to the COVID crisis because a lot of people paid attention to this.
Oh, yeah.
Same kind of issue happened in the vaccination issue.
Okay.
When you've got people who disagree with the momentum of an ideology, they get punished.
Yes.
Okay? For instance, a friend of mine or colleague, not really, he's an acquaintance,
Sure.
Dr. Peter McCullough, who I had at a conference with me that I organized in Las Vegas. Ryan Cole's a pathologist out of Idaho. Their careers were basically destroyed.
Wow.
Because they were against the message that was being put out about the COVID vaccine.
Yes.
Now, we can go back to vaccines way back when.
Yeah.
So we go back to the 1800s, 1900s. There was a major shift from the rural community into the cities. The cities were overrun. We had very poor sanitation and bad water.
Yeah.
Infectious disease went up significantly. Different type of gastrointestinal diseases, whooping cough, scarlet fever, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Where you have a mass of people together with bad sanitation, bad water, and it perpetuated itself. But the interesting thing is, by the time we get into the 1940s, where vaccinations were pushed real hard, 90% of the infectious diseases had been cured by. We had 40 out of the 45 states that existed back in 1940 having health departments.
Okay.
So we had health departments before we had vaccines.
Yeah.
We had the cleaning up water before we had vaccines.
Sanitized water.
We had sanitation before we had vaccines. And we saw a precipitous drop. Dr. Pawlowski, who is a pediatrician, wrote a wonderful article in the American Journal of Pediatrics back in 2000 showing where 90%, all these graphs, you can see all the graphs, all of these different diseases were going down.
Okay.
Before vaccines, before significant antibiotics.
Huh.
You got to sit there and go, okay.
Yeah.
Now we have this big push for vaccination, constant vaccination. And if you didn't get vaccinated and there was a slight rise in, for instance, measles, now we need 2 vaccinations a year. So we've gotten to a family who pushes medicine, pharmacology, trains the medical students in medical school. They had a direct input into all of the ideology of medicine. You don't push homeopathic medicine, you push allopathic drug medicine. And that's persisted.
Wow.
Now, 70% of physicians today are employed by hospitals, which are owned by big corporations, which are influenced by Big Pharma.
Wow. So it's all connected to this Big Pharma machine.
All connected.
Wow. And then you brought up in something that happened in 1986, and that was a very important juncture when it comes to vaccines because of something that was passed with President Reagan. Is that correct? Is that my understanding?
Correct. So let's go back to the history on that. So I'm just going to give an overview. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a total anti-vaxxer.
Right.
I'm not total anti-pharma, but I'm pretty harsh on Big Pharma.
Okay.
And I will be the rest of my career. I've experienced the ideology, political aspect through my entire career.
Yeah.
At every level.
Right.
I mean, I ran a major trauma center for years. I was one of the busiest clinicians in San Diego County doing general surgery for years.
Okay.
I've prescribed a lot of medication, and I also have had my own illnesses where I've looked at homeopathic and allopathic.
Okay.
So in 1935, there was a big incidence of whooping cough.
Yeah.
Okay, and that particular virus is pertussis. So all of a sudden, there was this big push to create vaccines. Well, the problem, we're going to just look at that one because it does shed light on what happens. So lots and lots and lots of doses were created, but there was identified significant death and significant injury from the vaccine.
Okay.
And it was documented for years and years and years to show you how we get into the safety factors where there really wasn't safety factors in the COVID vaccine.
Okay, right. Yeah.
We're not going to get into that in depth, but we know that they created a vaccine quickly without the appropriate safety measures.
Yes.
we go back to this vaccine where they take a test tube. Okay?
Okay.
First and foremost, it was utilized that if it was the test tube, was it clear or not clear?
Okay.
And if it was clear, you could use that as a vaccine.
Huh.
They also knew that there was variable material in different strands of vaccine that they would put out.
Okay.
That was well documented.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the LD50 test. If 51% of the mice lived with that injection of that particular vaccine batch, then you could give it.
Oh,
Think
wow.
about that.
That's just wild.
49% of the mice died, but 51% of them lived.
So it's okay.
It was so primitive, okay?
Wow, yeah.
So all of these things existed back then. Then all of a sudden, there was more and more light shed on all of these vaccine injuries.
Okay.
And so then the attorneys got involved. Just to put a little light on me, I'm a medical legal expert, have been for decades, one of the busiest in the country at times.
Wow.
I know a lot of attorneys. I've worked in 42 states on cases. I've worked with hundreds of attorneys, so I have a little bit of experience with this.
Yeah.
The attorneys started getting involved, and they shed light on all of this. Then there was... Now we got to get into, okay, here's what pharma is doing. Pharma is not responding to all these injuries. They're not changing the vaccine.
Yeah. It's like they don't really care about the patients. It's like, I mean, that's a conclusion I would draw from that is if they're okay with living with that, then they must not really care about the individuals that are going through these horrific experiences.
Pastor, you're doing a great job. This is what I want. I want to provide the information and get the response from your audience and
somebody
you,
who's listening,
what you think that means to you. I know what it means to me, and I don't need to editorialize this.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you the facts.
Yeah.
And you're starting to get it.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you have child after child after child after child documented. Mm-hmm. And you have pediatricians who have written literature that indicates there is a significant potential problem with these vaccines. Mm-hmm. And the major literature that all the pediatricians follow was called the Red Book.
Okay.
And then pharma gets involved and starts giving honorariums, money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To a lot of these pediatricians, and especially the pediatricians who wrote the literature.
Wow.
Well, then those pediatricians started going, well, we're doing more to look into this, and they were criticizing their own papers and literature.
Yeah.
Okay? That is quite unusual.
Yes.
Then you see through history, just like with the COVID thing, history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. The people who started to try and put out information that was against the flow of the ideology pushed by government and Big Pharma were pushed and penalized.
Okay.
Same thing happened back then.
Wow.
So now what they've done is they turned these professionals who wrote literature and looked at these vaccine injuries, and now they're telling them, well, I probably made some mistakes in my paper, and this maybe not be true.
Right.
And bingo.
Yeah.
You got the flow. Now they're bought.
Yeah, yeah. So you have a panel of experts that are critiquing all their own work, and nobody from outside or with a dissenting opinion or a difference of perspective is allowed to speak into this issue anymore because they've been sidelined. You've been listening to Taking a Stand with Pastor Phil McKay. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. Also, you can follow us on social media, and for more content, visit calvaryreno.org/takingastand. Visit calvaryreno.org to learn more about our church. And if you have a question, please email it to info@calvarychapelreno.org. And remember, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything.